It is. Got it. Well, good morning, RDPC. It is daylight savings time. And I hope everybody survived the blizzard of 22 this weekend. I spent hours shoveling the snow off of my driveway because the homeowners association won't pay unless there's at least 2 inches, and it was about 1/4 of an inch out there. So
Watch your back.
Yeah, right.
yeah, I'm just joking. I don't shovel. We moved in here we're going on 14 years now, which is kind of weird. It's like the longest we've ever lived in one particular place. But the first winter that we were here, we moved in August, and the first winter we were here, we had a snowstorm in the middle of the night or early morning. I heard the plow trucks outside, rolled over, said to my wife, the homeowner association just earned every penny we'll ever pay to it. So it's pretty cool. So anyhow, yeah. Weird weather, but it's going to be spring. I guess, temperatures are going to go back up into the 60s and 70s, and we'll hopefully have some good weather to go out and do some good photography. Couple of announcements is you all probably saw my email that we are going back to live today, or this meeting is like the 2-year anniversary of Zoom meetings for this club. I think I started the first virtual meeting in March 2 years ago. And I know, like I'm happy to get back live, and I think a lot of people are, and there are a lot of people who are still a little bit hesitant about it. So the COVID protocols, when we meet, will be whatever the library has in effect. We'll be meeting at the Tuckahoe Library. Whatever COVID protocols they have, we'll conform to them. Although I don't expect, I kind of expect a lot of places to relax those protocols, especially over the next month, if they haven't already.
Hey, Ed, I know at the Glen Allen Henrico Library, there are no signs or requirements for masks, but I saw the staff wearing them.
Yeah, well, Tuckahoe is part of Henrico, and I would think they would all have the same requirements. So, yeah, I think that's the way the world is going. And the room is big. The room holds 100 people. We have usually 25-ish coming to a meeting. So if you feel you need to separate yourself, or you feel you need to wear a mask, just go ahead and do it. We're also going to try to have a Zoom link. Kemp, I mean, do you want to say anything about that?
I'm gonna give it a shot. The first time might be a little experimental, I guess, and then we may be able to improve it as we move along to later meetings. But then, if somebody feels that they really don't want to attend in person, we should have a Zoom link up so that they can watch on Zoom and participate on Zoom.
Well,
So that'll be, I don't think that'll be a really great experience when we have, something like demonstrations or something like that, but we'll try it, give everybody the option. Sometimes you just squeezed because you have an appointment that you have to do early afternoon, and Zoom is just a better option for you. And we'll see if we can keep that going. The other announcement that was in my email was the picture hanging. It was originally scheduled for April, but we kind of, with everything, we kind of let that slip, and we're lucky that the library had other months that were available this year, and we chose November. I think that'll give us a good opportunity to get out over the summer, create some great photography, and get it ready to hang. It'll be absolutely, I think that'll be a really good time. And I think Patricia, or I'm not forget, is it Patricia or Anita, who has the hanging hooks? I think it's one of you.
I do.
You do? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, we'll be in touch, and we're going to need somebody to chair that event. So, and chairing the event means, you know, getting information from everybody who wants to hang and helping, and we'll get a few people to help hang in the library. It's always a good opportunity for us. Other than that, let's see, Richard, you've been busy on the website. You want to talk about that?
Well, the main thing lately is trying to set up the Google for Nonprofits account, and I'm waiting to hear from them because it requires approval from a third party to certify our nonprofit status. And just reading this morning, I a bit late found out that if we had a Google Nonprofits account, that also includes free video conferencing.
Oh,
That's cool. Okay.
Oh, for the next, when the next variant comes, if we get that account, we'll be prepared.
Yeah, I don't remember doing any, or the Google video conferencing that I've been at has been, I think, a little bit more difficult than Zoom. So, and the club is not paying. I mean, you know, I volunteered my personal account. Kemp is, you know, good enough to volunteer his personal account because we both use it for other reasons also. And there's no additional charge for having a meeting. So, you know, we'll see how that goes, but it'll be good. It'll be good. Thank you. Let's see. Peter, you have anything coming up?
Yeah, I'm hoping that as things change, we'll get more people showing up at the photo shoots. Those of you who missed last Friday missed a fun shoot. It was a great day, and thanks to Pam, Patricia, who lives in Churchill, we got in to see a few things that the ordinary folks don't get to see. Thank you,
That's
Patricia.
cool. Yeah, I was really
thank you,
disappointed.
Patricia. It was great.
It was
I was
And
really
you.
disappointed because I had ordered something, and for some god awful reason, they wanted a signature on delivery. So I'm sitting in my house all day until about 5 o'clock when it finally arrived. So that was crazy. And I'm really disappointed I missed that.
Yeah,
Anything else?
we had a great time, and as I said, we saw some things that the ordinary folks don't see. Thank you again, Patricia.
What were those things, Peter?
Well, you know the Richmond Hill Religious Center up there.
Oh, yeah.
They have a beautiful
We got
garden.
inside there and saw the park and back, and it's absolutely a knockout.
It's a
and
garden.
so-
You
in
can
the
you
garden.
can go in if you ask. It's not officially open to the public, but they're cool with having visitors. You just go in and ask the desk, and they'll let you in. And it is a beautiful spot.
Cool.
So it helps to have somebody who lives in the neighborhood, I guess. The next one is, let's see, April 14th. It's a Thursday. We're going down to Bell Island, walking around there, going to Hollywood Rapids and so forth. If we're lucky, we'll get some kayakers out, but it might be a chance to get some flowing water shots and so forth.
What
So
time
who's
do you
the
think you'd be meeting, Peter?
2 o'clock, April 14th, 2 p.m. Thursday. Write it down.
I did.
Putting it in my calendar now. Hold on, in March, April.
I'm a little disappointed when only 1 or 2 people show up.
April 14th is a Thursday,
Yep,
and at 2 o'clock,
2 o'clock.
and that's going to be a Belle Isle shoot, right?
Belle Isle shoot. Wear your walking shoes or boots.
Does everybody have a recording thing beeping in their corner of their picture?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Upper left.
Okay, yeah, so that's just
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
standard. Okay.
that's standard. Zoom puts that on to alert everybody that the session is being recorded, so you know it. I guess at somewhere in the history of Zoom, somebody was, changing clothes in the middle of a Zoom conference and didn't realize that everything is being recorded, and who knows,
I think you're talking about the CNN reporter.
whatever.
I have a few things for the April. Can I?
Peter, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Nancy.
April meeting, we have a interesting meeting as it, it will be live. We have Sue's going to give us a very short talk on the gradient tool. Tom's going to give a little presentation on close-up photography because our May challenge is close-up photography. So that'll get us inspired to go out and do that. And Peter's going to give us a little talk on, I'm not quite sure what. I thought it was,
I'm not sure either.
I thought it was the scenic roads of Virginia, but he thought it was something else. So anyhow, Peter's going to give us a little, so we have 3 15-minute presentations, but the fun part of the meeting is going to be what Becky nicknamed photo share on steroids. We're going to integrate into part of our program is we're going to ask you to send the original right out of the camera. Didn't do anything. If you're shooting RAW, just take that RAW and convert it to a JPEG. Don't take the JPEG from the camera because that has some processing. We're going to ask you to send that and your final picture. So we'll ask you to send, that'll be in addition to regular photo share. So maximum 2 or 3, we'll see how many participants we get. And this is going to be for inspiration, not instructional, but we'll have a little bit of conversation, but it'd be interesting to see how people's creative minds work from what they originally shot in the camera and what they ended up with. So I hope we get some good participation for that. And that'll be part of the April meeting. The June challenge is textures, and we're looking for someone to give a short 5, 10, max 15-minute talk on textures. Hopefully we'll get someone so we can get inspired for the June challenge that Peter sets up. And in the May meeting, depending on where we are with COVID and protocols and all of that, we may do a more social rather than a sit-down presentation. We may do a participatory, have Leo bring in his things, maybe set up some other tabletops, have some table talk kind of thing. So we'll see how that goes. That's what we have on the short-term scheduled programming. And of course, we have Robert today and anxious to get and hear what he has to say.
Yeah. And I got to say this, if you have not yet sent in your dues, please do so. Send it to Ray. Ray, what's your address again?
It is 6912 Welch, W-E-L-C-H Drive, Chesterfield, 23832.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, for the April meeting, only paid up members, our rules say that you have to pay your dues by February, the end of February, or the meeting on February. But, we've pretty much always been lax on that. But for the April meeting, only paid up members will be invited to the April meeting. And that's about it. I guess, who's going to introduce, or is there anything else anybody wants to talk about before we?
Well, I'll say on the members who have not paid, I sent to the board that listing of the 13 who have not paid. And I think we'd said from our last board meeting that if you had a relationship with those people, you would touch bases to see if they were still interested in continuing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did send a couple emails out, which I
Okay,
copied Jane on.
cool.
All right. Anything else before we turn it over to Monsieur Pfeifer?
I'm going to mute everybody before, or as Robert is talking. So, and if you have a comment or something or a question for Robert, then you can just unmute yourself and then mute yourself again after.
Okay. All right, Monsieur Pfeiffer, I think everybody knows him, so there's no introduction needed.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to talk about black and white photography. I've been doing it for quite a while. So it's a great topic. I hope I can fill in some new insights or some new knowledge on it. So basically, I'd like to, if you have a pen and paper, I don't have a slideshow or anything, so if you can take notes, whatever. But black and white is a great topic. I mean, photography started out as a black and white medium, basically. And black and white art has been around for thousands of years. You've had pen and ink drawings and charcoal drawings. And in fact, one of the things I did in school, I took art in school. I majored in art. So I took courses in charcoal drawing, and that helped me see in black and white. So I recommend that. I mean, I know you can take courses or at least try to do charcoal drawing. It will really help you see things in black and white because all you've got is a black charcoal and white paper, and it makes you understand the gradients of color, gradients of tones, and how black and white creates images. So so what is black and white? What do we talk about when we talk about black and white? Some people say monochrome is another word. Monochrome is more just one color. Black and white is specifically a black and white. It's a colorless medium. Monotone can be sepia, or it can be blue. It can be a one color. But black and white is specifically something's made up of just black and white and gray tones, no color whatsoever. Black and white is a reduction. It's a reduction of an image. What you're doing when you in black and white is removing color. I know it's kind of obvious, but you're removing the color. It's color adds information to an image. That's all it does. It fills in that information. You've got a red shirt, a blue sky. It's information. It gives you more information. And black and white takes that away. It removes that information. It's just taking the image down to its what I call like the skeleton of the image, just the tones, just the lights and the shadows. The light and dark is what's really important. What looks good in color doesn't always look good in black and white. It's a fact. You really have to understand light to do black and white. Let's take say it's Christmas time and there's a wreath on the wall, and you take a picture of the wreath and it's got a red ribbon on it and looks pretty, and take a color picture of that, and you convert it to black and white, and that wreath will be just nothing but gray. The red and the green are the same tone of gray. So what looks good in color doesn't always work in black and white. So you really have to understand light and shadow, where the light is, what the light is hitting on. You really need to understand color. Color is the friend of, contrast is the friend of black and white. It's really, you need contrast in light and shadow. So light is important, and what you see in black and white is how light hits an image. You can even see you in this in the Zoom meeting. There's light on your face. There's light and shadows. That's what black and white is. So there's basically 3 or 4 characteristics of black and white that we need to that I've kind of created, or I kind of areas where black and white are define black and white. First of all, of course, is highlight and shadow. That's the first major characteristics, major important thing about black and white. Black and white is made up, like I said, of highlights and shadows. I can't really emphasize that more. You really have to do black and white successfully. You really have to understand or see highlights and shadows. Where is the light coming from? What is the light hitting? How is the light shaping whatever it's hitting? The gradations of tone on an image, from where the light is hitting it to where it's not hitting it. This is something that you just have to be very aware of, highlights and shadows. The highlights and shadows give you the shape and the sense of the subject. It gives you in black and white. Now, we can't talk about black and white without talking about Ansel Adams, who very understood highlight and shadow. That's what he did. He created the zone system. And I know somebody asked about the zone system, but he created, with a friend, created the zone system. And he was a master at compressing the dynamic range into his images. The zone system basically controls contrast. That's what it essentially is. It's a way of controlling contrast. And he did that in the film process. It's very different in digital. We have histograms and all that, but in film, it was an analog medium. So he created, he controlled the contrast using exposure and development. And basically the zone system is essentially, you've got 10 zones from solid black to solid white, and 10 zones in between. Each is a shade of black. Each represents one stop of light. That's the entire zone. And what he did was, if you have a light meter, whenever you point a light meter, a spot meter, that meter will create whatever it is reading. It will create a neutral gray. It will make that a neutral. It'll make a mid-tone. Whatever you point the light meter at, it will give you an exposure that will make that whatever it's reading a mid-tone, a zone 5. So that's just a known fact. All light meters do that. Cameras have what you call evaluative metering, which is kind of like a zone system. It's more complicated. But if you have a meter, a traditional light meter, and you point it at an object, whatever light is there, it's going to make that object a neutral midtone. So if you know that if you take a meter reading of a shadow area, what you do is you go down 2 or 3 stops, and you've made that shadow area a shadow area, not a midtone. So you can actually control your shadows. You can, if you want detail in your shadows, you can control the tonal range of that shadow. Knowing, just go down 2 stops and you've got your shadow. A zone 2 and zone 3 are shadowy areas, and where you still have detail. A black area is solid black, which would be zone 1. A zone 2 and 3 is just beginning to see shadow detail. So if you point a light meter at a shadow and you go down 3 stops, you've got that shadow where you want it. And that's what Ansel Adams did. He'd go into an area, he would read the shadow, made a meter reading of the shadow, and he would figure out, well, if I want that shadow in zone 2, I can just go down 3 stops and boom, that shadow's in zone 2. And then he would take a meter reading off the highlight, the brightest area. And he would say, well, if that's, say that highlight area is like 8 stops greater than his shadow reading, he would realize that highlight, if he processes it normally, that highlight's going to be blown out. It's going to be white. So he would realize that, and in the development process, I don't know how many of you did processing in traditional film, he would lessen the time in development. And when you lessen the time in development, the longer the film is being developed, the more silver gets on the image, and it's proportionally more for highlight areas. So as the film is in the developer, the longer it's in there, the more contrast you pick up, the more silver is getting into the highlight areas. And so if you shorten that development time, the less silver gets on that highlight areas, and you can actually compress, you can get detail in the highlight areas by lowering the development time. So if he had a very contrasty scene, you'd make a meter reading for your shadow, and then you would adjust the development time. Let's say it's 30 seconds for 1 stop of light. and he would just go down, maybe lower it a minute, and he would get his highlights in where he wanted them to. So that's basically you're controlling contrast with the zone system, and it's the opposite too. For a very flat scene, say you have a forest, there's no light there, it's overcast, and you want to create contrast. Well, you take a meter reading, and then you just overdevelop. You make contrast out of that scene. Well, we today have we're blessed to have digital, and we have histograms on our cameras, which give a readout of highlight and shadow. On the left is the shadow, on the right is the highlights, and you get this. It's an X and Y algorithm. You can see all the tones in your image from highlight to shadow, and if you've got a lot of shadow areas, your tones, your information is going to be really heavy on the left side, and if there's a lot of highlights, it's going to be really high on the right side, and we can control that. We can see that right away. Today we use HDR, which is kind of like the zone system. It's another way of controlling contrast. You take multiple exposures and you stack exposures. HDR stacks exposures, and it maps the tones so that you get all your tones in. You get shadow detail and highlight detail. It's a little different. It's more of a digital process, but the same result. You're controlling contrast with HDR for very contrasty scenes. But it's not the zone system. HDR is not the zone system because you're using multiple exposures and combining those multiple exposures. However, today, the newer cameras, I don't know if you've noticed, but the newer sensors are amazing. The dynamic range of sensors today are phenomenal. You're really able to pull in shadow detail and highlight detail without having to do multiple exposures. I've discovered that now. The new cameras, the Sonys and things like that, are able to pick up quite a range of zones. So anyway, that's the zone system, and that's what Ansel Adams did. That's how he created these beautiful black and white images where every single tone from zone 1 to zone 9, everything was there. And it was beautiful detail. You're able to control that. So that's highlight and shadows. Really understanding highlight and shadows is very important for black and white. So what's next is lines and shapes. Lines and shapes. You really have to understand lines and shapes to really create do creative images in black and white. Leading lines, you can have roads, pathways, fences, wires, anything that is a line that draws your attention. Lines tend to draw your attention to your image. Your eye just naturally follows lines. So because you don't have that information of color that's giving you all this information, you're stripped down. So you need those graphic elements. Those compositional elements become very important in black and white. Shadows can be leading lines. Diagonal lines are really powerful. If you can find a diagonal line that leads your eye into an image, that's really important. Lines become really important. Become more aware of lines when you do black and white. Shapes as well. Geometric shapes, abstract, natural shapes, organic shapes. Geometric shapes, architecture. There's, you get a lot of lines in architecture. There are architects that will ask for black and white just because black and white really emphasizes the lines and the shapes of what they've created. They've created this building, and black and white, because you've taken away the color, has really emphasizes the beautiful lines and shapes of the architecture, the geometric patterns, whatever, of the architecture. So that's very important, lines and shapes. Also organic shapes like rocks, even the people, the face, your face is a shape. And if you do portrait lighting, you're just looking at the shapes of things. Um, One of the things that like fruits and vegetables, you can do black and white just of like, or flowers. You do black and whites of flowers. You can see the highlights, shadows, the shapes, how the shape of that object. The beauty of black and white too is that when you just have the tones, when you just have highlights, shadows, lines, and shapes, you begin to get into what is known as an abstract quality. You can create something that is in color, you could recognize right away. But when you go to black and white, it becomes something more. It becomes more abstract because you're dealing with, you stripped away the color, the information now, and you've got lines and shapes, and it becomes something different. And that's what the fascination with black and white is. Because when you take a picture and do black and white, it becomes something different. You've taken that color information away, and you're just dealing with the light. And that's why lines and shapes, playing with different shapes, you can be very creative. You can do abstract. I've done a lot of abstract photography just using black and white because there's so much. Even though it's less information, it's more creative because you see the world differently. Like take like an automobile. You take a picture of a car in color, you got all the information there, but you do it in black and white, it becomes something different. It becomes something abstract. You take the details of the panels of the car, it becomes this abstract thing. It's like, what is that really? Lines and shapes and highlights and shadows, it becomes something unique. So black and white, highlights, shadows, lines and shapes become very important. So the third thing is textures and patterns. Textures and patterns. Black and white is really great for textures. Textures are surfaces that have an uneven surface that when light hits it, it's just an interesting, it creates textures and pattern. It creates a pattern. It creates a unique, I don't know how to say it, but a texture that is unique. And black and white is really useful in creating these abstract textures. If you find, like say tree bark, if you photograph the bark on a tree, it in color, it looks like bark on a tree. It just, there it is. But you take that same picture in black and white, and that the bark on that tree becomes like a lunar landscape. It becomes something much more fascinating because you're dealing with just the lights and shadows and the shapes of things and the lines and look at where the line is going. And it becomes something more interesting, more abstract, more interesting. So it becomes more, textures become more interesting from an artistic standpoint. Rust on metal. Rust has it's kind of a texture to it. You take it in color, you recognize right away, oh, that's rust on metal. It's kind of got the brown color, But you take it in black and white, then it becomes something very abstract. It becomes something more has an artistic quality to it. So textures and patterns. Patterns are repeating elements in an image. Windows, it could be trees, a line of trees, it can be a pattern of objects, it could be birds, it could be patterns, because when you're doing black and white, you're looking for something that's interesting for the eye to look at. You're looking for those lines I talk about, and also patterns, because the color is missing, the information of color is missing. So you've got to create a pattern, something for the eye to look at, using the highlight and shadows. So look for those things. Look for textures, look for patterns and things when you do black and white. That really helps you see in a new way. See that the world has more of an abstract. It's an abstract world in black and white, and that's it makes it more interesting. So if you want to do creative black and white, think in terms of highlight, shadow, lines and shapes, textures and patterns. That's what you should be looking for in black and white. So the fourth thing, and I'd talk about too, that what I've talked about so far is just the visual aspects of black and white, the basic, the appearance. But there's also one more category, and that is documentary work. Black and white is really, because it strips away the information of color. Color is, again, adding information to an image. Black documentary photography, and I'm talking about street photography, doing an essay on something. Black and white has this timeless quality to it because the information of color is gone. Color adds time and place to an image. You can see the sky, you can see the colors add information. But when you take that away, the image now has a timeless quality to it. You really can't say so much when that picture was taken. It's got this unique timeless quality. And for street photography, that's really an important aspect. People love, this graphic sense of street scenes of people and street scenes in black and white because of the timeless quality. It gives it mystery, kind of a novel, kind of there's not all the information there, so you have a timeless, classic look. And so even like photographing people, it gives it that timeless, classic look that removes time and place, and there's a beauty to it. And of course, when you do documentary photography, street photography, you want to look for those lines, you want to look for those shapes as well while you're shooting. We just did a shoot not too long ago with my group, and we were doing some street photography. And it was a sunny day, and there was all kinds of shadows on the sidewalk, trees and lines. And while we were photographing people on the sidewalks, we incorporated those beautiful lines of the shadows. And that's what you want to do to make a dynamic street photography. You want to include some of those visual elements that black and white really needs. You really need to have those contrasty, those lines, the shapes, those highlight shadows. You really need to have those in your image to make a compelling image. Because like I said, not everything looks good in black and white. If you don't have those highlights, if you don't have those lines, you don't have those shadow areas, what you're going to come out with is something very gray. It's just going to be a blob of gray. I have taken images that I thought would look great, just images, and it just, you make them grayscale and it's just a bunch of gray. So you have to be aware of those lines, the shadows, the highlights, the shapes of things, and you really have to be aware of what you're doing. So I recommend, if you shoot black and white, to I know digital cameras can do this now. You can put your back panel on monochrome. It's a setting in your camera. I know you can do it on Nikon, but it helps you when you take the picture. You see right away, okay, that's a compelling image. That I see lines in there, I see shapes, I see highlight shadows. This is working for me. But at the same time, you may take a picture of a tree and it's green leaves, and it's like, well, that's just a bunch of gray. It's not interesting, but it's great in color. I love the color green, and look at the grass. It's so pretty and green, but you make that black and white and it just becomes just gray, and it's not interesting at all. So you really do need to think about light, shadows, lines, shapes, and what you're doing with black and white. It doesn't always work well. An image doesn't always work well in black and white without those qualities to it. So as digital photographers, we don't have dark rooms, we don't have light meter, Ansel Adams are not out there. We have an advantage. We have an incredible advantage with digital. We have histograms on the back of our cameras. We can see our highlights, shadows. We can see things right away. look at our back panel, we can see black, that monochrome image. Amazing advantage. Plus, we have software which converts our color images to black and white. And there's a number of them. There's Silver Effects by Nick. I think it's owned by Google now. There's Topaz, has black and white. There's PhotoKit 2, it's another black and white conversion thing. And of course, there's Photoshop, which has its own black and white conversion things. And the beauty of digital, which they didn't have back in the film days. In the film days, they controlled tones using color filters. They put a red filter on the camera in order to darken the sky and things like that to control the tones. Ansel Adams used color filters, green filters, orange filters to control the tonal range. Well, we don't have to do that in digital. We can, we have RGB channels. And if you understand the channels in your Photoshop file, this can be very helpful in black and white because you can control the tones by sliding your red, green, and blue channels. You can control the tones of an image. The red is a tone, the green is a tone, and the blue is a tone. And when you control those tones, you can recreate the image. You can actually control the tones of your image, which is an amazing advantage we have with black and white. You can mess around with that. It's very tricky. You know, you move one just a nudge and you got to move the other one, but you get a knack for it to try to control the tonal range of your black and white image using those RGB sliders. But I do recommend Silver Effects. They're already programmed in. You just choose a black and white setting that you like, and it does a great job. So that's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun to do black and white. I enjoy it. It's a unique way of seeing, and but now that it's spring and colors are coming out, but you know, you can do. I know I've photographed flowers in black and white, and I will tell you, you really see light when you photograph in black and white. You don't see it so much in color. Colors that you're just distracted by the color. What's a blue flower, a red flower? Oh, look at the red color, it's beautiful. But when you take that away, all you're left with are the shades of tones of light to shadow. And there's a unique beauty to that. And even in spring, when you got flowers blooming, try it. Try photographing a flower in black and white, and you will be amazed at the beauty of light and how it hits an image from light to shadow. It's just, there's a beauty to that that's very unique. And so anyway, any questions from people? You can unmute people. I don't know if you have any questions for me. That's basically it.
So Robert, from what I'm hearing, maybe it's better to go out on a bright sunny day, which is not good for color. It's better to go out on a bright sunny day if you're out to think black and white.
Yes, you know, and I would say you need light for black and white. If you go out on an overcast day, most of your image is going to be in the midtones, and midtones look gray. And unless you're really looking for lines and lines and things, you're going to come up with something very a lot of grays, and midtones aren't attractive. They're just gray. So yeah, you're right. You really need a strong light to make black and white. But of course, with a creative mind, and you can do something even on an overcast day with black and white. But yes, you're right. Light is very important.
Can you take that dull color picture and just pump up the colors and the contrast before you can try the conversion to black and white? Would you suggest that?
Not really. I wouldn't go color first. I would stick with the black and white. Just you want to get your eye seeing black and white. You want to see the tones. And using the RGB channels is really the best way to control tones and contrast, using levels. Curves are more, I think curves work better in color if you're doing Photoshop, because curves have a way of controlling the midtones. But levels are better in black and white because you're really controlling highlight and shadow and midtone, and it's really, you really want to deal with contrast in black and white. So I usually go to levels in black and white when I'm trying to control things. Curves are better for color because midtones are wonderful in color.
So do you know when you take a picture, are you thinking black and white behind the camera? Or you already, or does it, you get home and then say, oh, this will be good for black and white?
When I'm taking the pic,
do you pre-visualize it as black and white?
Yes, when I'm taking a picture, and I mostly shoot color, but every once in a while I'll come across the scene and I say, you know what, this is going to be a good black and white. I was in Maymont, it was snowing, and snow is great because there's lots of contrast. There's white and there's those stark trees and it's black and white. And I was thinking, you know what, there's some of these images are going to be good in black and white. Just before I even take the picture, I knew right away.
So are your camera settings different then? Do you adjust your camera settings at the time if you know it's going to be black and white?
No, not specifically. The color, no, I just make sure in digital, it's different than, like I said, with the zone system, Ansel had metered for the shadows. In digital, you're actually metering for the highlights. Why? Because highlights get blown out very easily in digital. So you want to be able to control that. You don't want the highlights to be, so you're watching your highlights. And that's when I shoot, when I expose, I'm always watching my highlights. I don't want to overexpose highlights because that's, but in black and white, like you said, you need contrast. So I'm more apt to blow things out or make things lighter, like snow. I'm going to overexpose. I'm going to brighten that up, and I want that contrast. So,
anybody have any other questions for Robert? Great presentation. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope I'm in.
Robert, oh, I do have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. So when you're going out and you're shooting the snow, are you purposely and you're shooting in color, are you purposely overexposing it right then and there on your camera, knowing that you're going to bring it down post-processing?
Yes, I want that snow to be white. The thing about it is your light meter, like I said, the light meter, if you point it at something, it's going to make that subject and zone 5. It's going to make it neutral. It's going to make it a midtone. So knowing that, if you photograph snow, what's the camera going to do? It's going to make that snow gray. It is. It's just going to make it a midtone. And in color, it's going to look blue. It's going to look like a blue.
Yeah.
So in black and white, it's going to be gray. So what you do is you kind of know that in your mind and say, okay, this is snow, so I'm going to overexpose in order to make that snow white. Yeah.
To bring it down. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
now I kind of wish we had a little bit more snow.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, no, snow's great, black and white. I love it.
Yeah, an interesting experiment you may want to try one day is to get 3 boards or papers, one white, one mid-gray, and one, close to black. Set it up on a table and fill the frame and use the exposure that the camera suggests, putting that, meter needle right in the middle, and take a photo of each and see what you get. As Robert had alluded to, they're going to look the same. It's amazing. All 3 of them will look mid-gray. You will have a very hard time differentiating the 3 of them if you do that. And then, take the white one and overexpose it a couple of stops, take the black one, underexpose it a couple of stops, and look at where your meter is. Your meter is screaming at you, telling you you've got the wrong exposure, but you really have the correct exposure.
Yeah, that's correct. That's absolutely correct. And that is the essentials of the zone system. Ansel Adams knew that. He pointed his light meter at the subject. Okay, I got to underexpose 2 stops, or whatever that meter says, and then he got his zone right where he wanted it to be.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Robert, I have a question. And your lifetime of pictures there, do you ever do exhibits? As long as I've known you, I've not heard of you doing an exhibit somewhere. I know I do see your things out on Facebook, but have you done exhibits?
Oh yeah, I've had a number of shows at Artworks.
Okay.
In fact, last year I had a show there. Yeah,
And,
it's Journeys.
and if I may do a little bit of shameless self-promotion, I have an exhibit of my black and white street photography up now at Ann's Visual Arts Center Gallery, which is 208 West Broad. It's right across the street from where Richmond
yeah.
Campbell is.
Stop
And
by
I had my opening last week for fourth Friday and first Friday, and April 1st will be the second opening. We'll be doing a little talk at 6 p.m. So, if you get a chance to mosey over there, take a look. And like I said, all of them are black and white street photography. As Robert said, I totally agree with him that street photography screams for black and white.
Robert, one more question.
Sure.
How much can you, dodging and burning can compensate if you didn't quite get it right in the camera for black and white?
Yeah, sure. You're dealing with highlight and shadows. Contrast is your friend in black and white. So if you can make something more interesting with dodging and burning, yeah, absolutely. Ansel Adams was famous for dodging and burning. Was all the time. I tend to burn the corners just to keep your eye in the image and highlight the areas where I want people to see. Where your eye is attracted to contrast, it's also attracted to light areas. So if you want to direct someone's eye to something, you can lighten it, and your eye will go there. So yeah.
What is your first tool in post-processing to increase contrast for black and white?
Oh, levels. Levels are key. I use levels in black and white.
Robert, are you using Photoshop or are you using Lightroom or something?
Photoshop. I use Camera Raw, and I have Capture One too, but I don't do a lot. I do some things. I get it pretty close. When it comes to black and white, there's not a lot of post-processing going on. I've found. It's really just highlight shadows. If I get that in there, it's done. It's basically, there may be some fine tuning on it, but most of the black and whites are not as intensive on post-processing as color is.
Robert, you said you used the program Silver Effects.
Yeah, Silver Effects is a very good program for converting color to black and white. I recommend it. It's been around a while. I think it used to be a Nix software, but I think it's owned by Google now. You can look it up. But what it is, basically what it is, it has all kinds of presets. So you don't have to go in there with your RGB sliders and channels and all that yourself. They've got a bunch of presets, and you just select which preset looks good for your image. And they're all done. They've all been done the research on it. And they've got a great, really, and if you want to go in and do some custom work in Silver Effects, you can do that too. But their presets are really nicely done.
Do you use any other specific, programs like Silver?
No, it's just Silver Effects and Photoshop. I mostly go into Photoshop and do that.
Yeah.
And levels, like I said, levels will get my contrast in right where I want it to be.
Well, since Robert's spoken so much about levels, and Sue's giving us a little talk next month on gradient tool, maybe somebody will step up and give us maybe a 5-minute little tutorial on the levels tool sometime.
Yeah, there is no levels tool in Lightroom. which is
That's
really.
Photoshop thing. Oh. Good,
Yeah,
yeah.
there is in Photoshop, and Robert,
Yeah.
you see, I use Capture One almost exclusively,
One,
and
yeah.
of course, they have a levels tool, but
Yep, that's what I said.
I think the only way to possibly do something like levels in Lightroom is to set your white and black points, where when using the
Yeah.
white slider and the black slider, press the Alt Option key, and you'll be able to see like little specks come up as you move the sliders, and that'll set the extremes of your white and black points, so you're not missing information on either side.
All right, any other questions for Robert? I think we've beat him up a bit. But it was a wonderful presentation, and I
Yes,
said,
thank you.
I am now inspired. As I said earlier in the meeting, I was not inspired to get my camera out of the closet, but now I am. So thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Ter-
Thanks
Terrific
very much.
Absolutely,
presentation.
Robert. Thanks very much.
Yep, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Robert, you're welcome to stick around. What we're going to
Okay.
do now is photo share. Photo share is